It's the way this show started back in 2006 when I got on the phone with
Mhm.
some guy named Sigmund Bloom who had just been hired by football guys. And we're like, let's talk about the draft. And we talked about it for 3 hours. Then I said, let's make that a show because I had been tasked by the great Joe Bryant to create a internet radio show. I don't even think they were
Yeah.
called podcasts, Bloom. So
Right.
that's how the Audible started. I actually over the weekend, before the draft, so it was like Wednesday or something. I was listening to the very first episode of the Audible. I was like,
Oh, wow.
yeah, it's cool. I mean, I'm not very good, but you get your chops in, right? And to hear you, man, and have that energy, and then today to be able to share that with you 19 years later. It's fantastic. We're going to get into the teams at Tennessee North today on the draft recap here on the Audible Bloom. But before we jump in, we just have to reflect on we've been doing this a while, buddy.
Yeah, we have. We've learned some stuff. We've watched some stuff happen, and then later on learned how little we actually know about what's gonna happen
Right.
when the draft goes down. Like I said, I'm gonna stick with this. It's like getting to see the future, but not understanding what you're seeing. So having to go back to the present and catch up with that future before you finally do understand what you saw. But we're gonna shoot our takes, and of course, we're here to try to help spin it for fantasy, but also just revisiting the draft as such an important holiday on the football calendar, on the sports calendar, because the reason this show started when we geeked out for 3 hours. It was 3 hours that passed like in 5 minutes. I think we're men. Hi, I'm a man. Give me an opportunity to tell you what I know, as you're doing right now, actually. That will make me gratifying to me. And I think we're really enjoying like just that somebody else cared about all the level of minutia that you can learn about the draft leading up to it, even back then. Although obviously the amount of coverage and information of the draft seats has exploded, I don't know, tenfold,
Yeah.
50-fold
Yeah.
since then. But still, that we were talking about the information that we had learned about these players and what specific conjunctions or alignments excited us, or maybe a pick we were anticipating, or a pick that we didn't understand. But we talked about it for 3 hours, and it's only the football fans that I think really are into the story of football, because every intellectual subject about football intersects at the draft. Every narrative, human, spiritual, emotional, psychological story intersects at the draft. So it's the true football guys and football gals that meet up, that have their brains tuned into this and turn on to it. And that's why this is such an important holiday, and why it's so exciting and renewing. Because in the end, Cease, the draft is about birth and rebirth. And we should all get a little bit of that in our lives every now and then.
Yeah, it's a celebration, and Chicago Bears are the team we start out with in the NFC North. Of course, it's Caleb Williams. Of course, he's got generational talent. Of course, I'm worried the Bears are going to screw him up. I think that's maybe a larger conversation for later, Bloom. But they got Caleb Williams, number one overall, of course, because they were going to do that. Roma Dunze, they follow that up at number 9. Reminds me of Larry Fitzgerald. Third round, Kiran Amagadije, Yale offensive tackle. I hope I got that right. Torrey Taylor, punter from Iowa, hot punter talk. Austin Booker, though, fifth round,
Yeah.
Austin Booker. I was like, okay, Booker about a third, third, fourth round. Fifth round, Austin Booker, Kansas edge for the Chicago Bears with a few picks, a small amount of picks make a large impact for this team.
Yeah. Amagaji. Amagaji. We always get to brush more and more. We get to brush up on our pronunciation of foreign names in the NFL draft. A transformative draft, Cease. I mean, this is one of those drafts for Chicago that could be like how the Bears franchise was thought of before Caleb Williams and how we think of the Bears after Caleb Williams. It can be that transformative, and partially because Caleb Williams is a transformative figure in the NFL. He's the first name, image, likeness quarterback. He's the first quarterback that has understands the idea of being in the public light, in the public eye, and what comes with that, and he's influencing it, right? And this is why, Cease, before the draft, we heard a lot of stuff that I think, the anonymous scout stuff, that I think boiled down to, I just feel uncomfortable. This guy makes me feel uncomfortable, and I don't like that. As a scout, that's one of my scouting skills. But this
Oh,
new
for
generation
many
of players,
reasons, Bloom.
yeah,
For many
yeah,
reasons, he made
for
him
many
feel
reasons.
uncomfortable.
And this and how Caleb Williams does is, I think, going to be an interesting harbinger of the new generation of players. Player empowerment era fully upon us, and the Bears are going to have the first player empowerment quarterback. Thank you, Lovie Smith. Can we say that again, Cease? Thank you, Lovie Smith. Without Lovie Smith, none of this happens. Without that win that gets Chicago into the number one pick, of course, thank you, David Tepper. I mean, probably the only people thanking David Tepper right now are the Bears. And you get Caleb Williams. We've talked a lot about his game and what he can do. You also then have Rome Odunze, right? Sees the universe works in mysterious ways. Williams and Odunze on the same flight to Detroit. What's the symbolism there? They take a photo that may be iconic. If this really is for Bears fans, the dawning of a new era, that photo of Rome Odunze and Caleb Williams getting off of that flight and saying, "Look who I ran into," and having this glow about them. That's like the photo that's in the closing credits after they win the Super Bowl, right? Like going back to these moments that led up to this culmination. I'm not in Super Bowl, whatever, just forgetting about the era of the Bears never have a good quarterback, forgetting about the era of Bears offensive football is like Big Ten offensive football, you know? But Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze can do that. And having Odunze fall to them, you know, the Michael Penix pick is part of that story. Michael Penix pick is going to be part of a lot of stories from this draft. Wow, what a hookup. And remember, they also get Montez Sweat in this draft. Okay, they use a pick from this draft to get Montez Sweat, who looks fantastic already. And now now it looks like they actually got ahead of the market on edge salaries. So maybe I'm sure I might have been one of the people saying, I'm not sure about that move. It has really worked out for them. They also use a pick in this draft to get Keenan Allen. So, you know, this team, what an interesting division now the NFC North becomes. As we talked about with the Yale tackle, Magaji, a developmental left tackle. And see, how often do we see good teams spend picks on developmental left tackles? It's
Right.
like developmental quarterback at this point. So the Bears, Ryan Poles doing good things. They get the top punter. See, what are your thoughts about drafting punters?
Terrible. Sorry, I'm not here for the
Probably.
punter talk, baby. Yeah.
No, I know. So, you know, this is maybe the one thing that we on the Bears report card that we don't give them a strong grade. It is what's funny about this one. This is the Jalen Carter trade. So at least they got this pick by just letting Philadelphia move up one pick for Jalen Carter. But the reason that Troy Taylor was known as such a good punter is because Iowa's offense was terrible, even with Sam Laporta, and he got to break records for punting. So you also get Booker. This is a trade. I always like to put together the trades. The Ryan Bates trade, and then they gave up this pick for Ryan Bates, and then they got the pick back by giving up a fourth rounder next year for Booker. And this is the kind of pick you want your team to make on the third day. High ceiling, late bloomer, natural pass rusher. You think of a player that really only had 1 year of true experience and production as inexperienced. When you watch him, he looks like one of the most polished pass rushers in this draft. They also got Dan Feeney last year for a pick, the sixth. They got N'Keal Harry. Last time we're going to mention N'Keal Harry on this show, Cease.
Yes.
Obviously, neither of them on the roster. And there's the Bears. And I definitely think one thing I'll say that is going to, again, intersect in every one of these teams we talk about. And we're spending a little while talking about the Bears, and it's our first episode of this series, a little chatty. But this is that important for the Bears. And the NFL is like the great American novel now, I think. And these stories have epic sweeping. I mean, look, whether Caleb Williams is a flop or Caleb Williams takes this franchise to places it hasn't been, it's going to be quite a ride and an epic story. And one that, again, I think also says about where the NFL is going.
Undrafted free agent wise, we're going to do that for all these teams. Remind me if I forget Bloom, because I often
Yeah.
do. Western Kentucky quarterback Austin Reed. I saw him at the Senior Bowl. He's not real good. But of their
Yeah.
undrafted free agents, he's the one that stands out to me.
Yeah. It's actually not a very exciting UDFA class. If you like to get excited about this class, is Keith Randolph. I don't know. Dane Brugler had him as a sixth rounder out of Illinois, a plugger, you know, a guy that you like to have at the end of your roster to eat up some snaps, snap eaters. Well, it can't all be exciting, punters and snap eaters. And my team that I'm so excited about sees on the NFC side, Detroit Lions.
Yeah, Detroit Lions. Here we go. If we talk about Dan Campbell and company, and well, there you go, Terry and Arnold. All right, we could move out of the first round, or you could just get two really good corners to start out
Yeah.
with. Now, why Enos Rakestraw? Why was he there in the second? I don't know. There were some mocks early on that had him around the first round, so it's like, okay, you get a value pick there. You get arguably the best corner in the draft. I think Nate Wiggins is probably the most complete corner. Quinion Mitchell, the most athletic corner, but Terry Arnold, it might be the best corner from Alabama in the first round. Giovanni Manu, British Columbia offensive tackle in the fourth round. Sione Vaki, Utah safety, who can definitely play around the line of scrimmage. Makai Wingo, defensive tackle from LSU there in the sixth, and Christian Mahogany from Boston College, offensive guard, to wrap up what Dan Campbell did over the weekend.
Yeah, this is a Lions draft, and it's an effective draft in terms of you. If you looked at the Lions roster, you looked at. And remember, this team was one play away from the Super Bowl last year, and not in a flukish way. Okay, they went into San Francisco, and they were very much the equal, if not better, team in San Francisco and Santa Clara. So they move up for Arnold. They get him at 24. Honestly, if he would have went as high as 12 to Denver, I mean, see, if in a universe without Bo Nix, is Arnold in play at 12?
Edge was.
Or 13, the Raiders 14. Yeah, the Broncos could have. We'll save it for the last episode. That's why we end with wheat. So you see the first, not just two picks, the first three picks. Arnold, who's reunited with Brian Branch, can play inside, outside, high production on the ball. And Rakestraw, who is a tremendous cover guy, has an injury history. Doesn't he's why is he there in the second round? Injury history, and he isn't ideal physically in terms of length and speed, but he can cover like a mofo. Those guys tend to work out. So they're plugging holes in the secondary now. And remember, the third round pick turns into Carlton Davis. So you have a starting secondary. Wow. You come away with potential long term starting secondary for this team that pretty much has everything else that they need. They do give up a 2025 third to get Manu, who, maybe reminiscent of Jordan Mailata. Does have a rugby background. University of British Columbia. We don't hear much about trading up for players from University of British Columbia, but he's 6'7", 350, and they think they can make something out of him. Again, good organizations taking high ceiling developmental left tackle. Sione Vaki, I mean, isn't this just a Lions guy, running back, safety? I think the name Eric Weddle was thrown out there. And look, he's a guy I think that plays with all the energy and intensity and desire that you want. Maybe isn't the most refined or polished player, but doesn't that sound like a Detroit Lion? Yeah, right.
Eat
Um,
kneecaps.
well, that's the whole thing, right? And they move up for Wingo. Okay, this is a guy on Dane Brugler's board that was a third, fourth round pick. They get him well into the third day, and again, he's a guy who doesn't have ideal measurables, but he basically plays like a poor man's Ed Oliver. He's a captain. He was an LSU captain. Okay, uh, and again, there's this idea of loyalty. Rakestraw I think could have been an Alabama guy, but he stayed out of loyalty. Um, Mahogany is another guy that stayed where he was out of loyalty. Does that sound like a lion? Right? There's things that have more value than just maximizing your situation. And Dane Brugler described Mahogany Cease as basically like the bouncer at the club. That's how he plays football. Does that not sound like a Detroit Lion, like a kneecap biter?
Yeah, kneecap biter. I love it. And then Detroit Lions UDFAs. Well, Isaiah Williams was a player that I was excited to see down at the Shrine Bowl earlier this year. He's got some speed and hands to his game. He wasn't the best receiver there. I think that was probably, Washington, Taj Washington, or Malik
Mhm.
Washington. A lot of Washingtons and Williams. But either way, there's
Yeah.
a UDFA from the Lions I'm interested in. Bloom, how about you?
Yeah. Williams, we got to talk about. Highly productive, small, but still first team Big Ten receiver, a quarterback to wide receiver convert, a Lovie Smith recruit, by the way. So in the second time, we get two chances to talk about Lovie Smith right out of the box here. And a captain at Illinois. They gave him a pretty big guaranteed amount of money, like 225,000 or something. So they went after him. I mentioned Steel Chambers, another convert, running back to linebacker, a project. has the movement and everything you want in a linebacker. And again, what do you see with the Lions? They identify the person, the football player, not so much the traits and skills at this point, but just how is their engine turned on? Is the light turned on for them? And they think, okay, we can make players out of you if you've got that. You belong here.
Yeah, you belong here. You belong. Let's talk about Brian Gutekunst because, like, when Ted Thompson passes away, and God rest his soul, like you're like, okay, Brian, what can you do? And he's had some mistakes, but he seems to learn from his mistakes. And the Jordan Love pick, right? So many people upset, and what are they doing? And it's like, all right, now you see what they're doing. Now you can look at what Brian does. And being in this game so long, I was telling it on the air, Bloom. Like, I remember when Ian Cunningham was a road scout, like
Mm-hmm.
covering the Buffs in like
Mm-hmm.
2010, and now he's
Mm-hmm.
assistant GM in Chicago. So it's like I love seeing that growth and development of these people that are around football and love football tremendously. So Brian Gutekunst, the Packers, I admire this draft. Let's get into it because there's a lot to it. So Jordan
Yeah.
Morgan, power offensive tackle in Arizona there in the first round. Edgerrin Cooper, I had him as the number one ILB in this draft. Second round pick of Javon Bullard is where Georgia safety. You want to get to some Georgia players. They get my number one running back in this class. And I still remember at the combine when I asked Marshawn, "Hey, Marshawn, you're my number one running back. Tell me why I'm right." Which
Ah,
got some chuckles from the crowd. But anyway, Marshawn Lloyd, he can do it all, and he's got a bunch of speed. Yeah, he's got to clean up the fumbling. Okay, so you can do that, 5 points pressure, whatever. So, very excited to see what Marshawn Lloyd can do for the Packers there. Third round pick again, Teron Hopper from Missouri, linebacker. Fourth round is Evan Williams, Oregon safety. Fifth round, Jacob Monk, Duke center, another fifth rounder, and Keaton Otadapo, Oregon State safety. And then sixth round, Travis Glover, Georgia State offensive tackle. Michael Flipping Pratt in the
mm,
seventh round at quarterback. Um, I'm not saying he's going to be Matt Hasselback or Mark Brunell or Aaron Brooks, but Green Bay has a long history of
yeah.
doing this.
Yeah.
And yes, you take a guy, Pratt should have never been there. He should have been, a fifth rounder, maybe a fourth rounder if you're excited about him. Smart player, can distribute the football there. So seventh rounder, Michael Pratt, you love that. And then Kalen King, Penn State corner to wrap up this big draft for the Pack.
Yeah. Goody's comfortable, right? He's
Yes,
comfortable now.
yes. Mm-hmm.
Ted Thompson's successor. That's a massive name, right?
Mm.
Looming titans that we've encountered in our time on the draft scene, cease, and you can feel it. Like other teams are more like the hare in the tortoise and the hare, or at the very least, other teams cease. Like a Detroit, for instance, you could see exactly what they're doing. I mean, it's a plan that is apparent from a long distance. You can look at it and see, like, okay, this is what this team is about.
You use the word that we should use in this conversation, Bloom, comfortable. Because I was
Yeah,
gonna say frantic when you were saying this, but it's actually comfort. And Goody
yeah,
finally got comfortable. When other teams aren't comfortable, they seem frantic, but they're actually just uncomfortable in the process.
right. And why is he comfortable? Well, again, it wasn't apparent. Look, we all dunked, me included, on the Jordan Love pick, and the AJ Dillon pick and the Deguara pick were bad picks. So two out of the
Yes.
three bad. But the Jordan Love pick has worked out. And even when you look at how he's assembled this offense, because one of the magic tricks that Goody has pulled is having this whole offensive pass catchers on rookie contracts. Whenever it's escalating cost for wide receivers, and he's got three that have plenty of cost control years ahead. So my point is, as we talk about this, is that Goody is like the tortoise in the tortoise and the hare, and it might seem like, I don't want to say boring, but just not as exciting or get your adrenaline flowing as some of these other drafts when you think about how it's going to affect the team. Because as he's showing us, he's kind of playing 4D chess here. Jordan Morgan, in a great offensive line class, it's a fine pick. I mean, he may end up as a guard. I mean, you can always use players like him. Cooper's a nice fit, and they traded down before they got him. Just a seek and destroy linebacker, probably middle linebacker for this team. For IDP, there's your number one IDP in this class. Bullard, this is, and let's take Bullard. Let's take Bullard in concert with Xavier McKinney. So now you look at this team safeties, as a really nice combination of safeties with a lot of versatility. A lot of versatility. Bullard's got the instincts. He's got the Georgia pedigree. Lloyd, we've talked about on the show already. And what's interesting about Lloyd is he's very different than Josh Jacobs. Jacobs is more of a rugged, downhill, no nonsense runner. Lloyd has that zone style that we really like: patient, 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 burst. And that's exciting. He's going to be exciting as a contrast to Josh Jacobs, and he may allow them to move on from Josh Jacobs' contract next year. Jacobs may play well enough to make this into a dynamic duo. Fortunately, from the Jacobs point of view, this gets us back into the Matt LaFleur running back usage with Aaron Jones that kind of frustrated us. But it's, where they got him, like you said, Cease, it's all about the fumbles. Hopper, they get in the Rasul Douglas deal, they get this pick moved up where they can take Hopper, who's another quick, rangy linebacker, fits the type that they're looking for. Monk, they get after a trade up, just a solid, versatile interior lineman. More safeties, just totally redoing the safety depth chart here with Oladapo, who started out as a walk-on, and you have Glover, versatile, again, versatile depth. Pratt, and you're right, Cease, for this to make you think of those other Packers backups. A lot of people liked Pratt. A lot of people like Pratt better than Spencer Rattler as your sleeper potential starting quarterback here. A lot of experience, very efficient, very smart, even if just as a good backup, right? And then you get King. Got to mention Cass Tech in Detroit, another Cass Tech product. And going into this season, King was highly touted and potentially, a second first day pick, did not have a good year, struggled. Maybe he's a safety. So obviously the safety position was an emphasis here. Speed at linebacker, depth on the offensive line. Not exciting, but making this division more exciting as the Packers, the Lions, the Bears, and the Vikings all making moves and reforming their team in the new vision, but all in their own way.
Yeah, you mentioned the name that draws my ire, Spencer Rattler. So Michael Pratt. Yeah, Michael Pratt. Get Michael Pratt.
Yeah.
UDFA's not a lot
Mm,
here from the UDFA class, and some just were like that. And just watching how it went down, I'll throw out some love for Messiah Swanson, I guess.
yeah.
Nobody that I jumping off that I remember from the All Star road trip. So Bloom,
Yeah.
I'll hand it to you.
Trent Day Jones. Hey, uh, not many teams get their sixth offensive lineman in the NFL, but Michigan does. You get the Michigan super backup. And Jarvian Howard, former Syracuse back, power, speed, went to Alcorn State. I think he rushed for over 2,000 yards at Alcorn State last year and had a tremendous pro day. So physically looks the part of the NFL back. So, yeah, I mean, he could make this team over A.J. Dillon and Emmanuel Wilson.
Yeah, here we go. Minnesota. Here we go to wrap up the NFC North. It's the Audible draft recap, and it's JJ McCarthy. Now they move up the one spot to get JJ. They make sure that Denver has no chance to get him when Denver didn't really want him. And nobody else really did.
Right.
One thing that I've discovered in doing this is like, okay, there were three teams at least, and I'll get to it later, in on Bo Nix. There were maybe five teams in on Michael Penix. All right. And the Penix pick does play into this. We will talk Atlanta, and I will defend that pick and maybe scold some people when we do Atlanta. Okay. But we have to bring up the Penix pick here.
Mm-hmm.
But so Minnesota, they get kind of their guy because I still believe that Drake May was their guy, and certain people around the building, all these tie in Bloom, but like when the New England people were telling me, and I said on this show, I don't know if I believe them, they're going to take Drake May. What's Minnesota do to respond? Well, they would take JJ McCarthy, and oh man, Denver would hate that unless they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Just in talking to people during and then after the draft, it's like, okay, and I still like JJ, and I had him as a high second round graded player. So did Dane Brugler. But man, a lot of people didn't. So
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota, you got your guy? Question mark.
Right.
Okay, we'll get to the rest. We got a lot to talk about with JJ there. Dallas Turner, an option as maybe the Atlanta pick. Although I don't want to say hate. I was told Bloom the Falcons strongly do not like Dallas Turner.
Huh.
So there you go. Why didn't they take Dallas Turner? Because they hate him.
They weren't going to. Yeah.
Right, right. Kyrie Jackson, 4th rounder, Oregon cornerback. Walter Rouse, Oklahoma offensive tackle in the 6th round. Will Reichard, Alabama, place kicker.
Kicker alert.
Don't ask me about kickers, please. Michael Juergens, Wake Forest center. I didn't want to be rude when you asked me about the punter, but I was like, I don't care about punters or kickers. Anyway,
That was to set you
Levi
up. I was
Drake.
teeing you up.
Oh, okay, okay. Levi Drake Rodriguez, Texas A&M, Commerce defensive tackle. Let's talk about this, which means we're talking about JJ and Dallas.
Yeah, and like you said, Cease, just from a narrative standpoint, what's interesting here is you say they got their guy because from all outward indications, they did try to get up to number 3 for Drake May. I mean, I have not heard anything that contradicted that. I haven't seen anybody say no, that did not happen. So
Right.
awkward, kind of. But hey, JJ McCarthy, we gave up a 4th round pick. We liked you enough to give up a 4th round pick for the Imagine. And I did think it was funny. Boy, this Sean Payton covering again. It's a Denver show. It's going to be interesting for you. He's covering Sean Payton because he seemed a little too self-satisfied about. Oh yeah, we duped him into trading up. That's like when you signal for a first down when you're down 27 points in the 4th quarter. Okay, yeah, okay, great, you got him to spend a pick. Oh, actually, a rival on the other side of, and there's actually another team in your conference that actually got to benefit from that. But okay, Sean, good on you. But look, McCarthy is going to have great structure around him, right? I mean, it's all built for him already. So this is kind of like the Caleb Williams conversation, and I'm not holding what McCarthy didn't do or didn't have the chance to do against him. I think the other good thing here is because they only give up a 4th round pick instead of 3 first round picks, which obviously was not going to ever happen. Um, there's not much pressure to get him on the field. Sam Darnold can play until week 17 or 18, and let's see what happens down the line. I think that they got their future quarterback at a pretty reasonable price. They got another Kirk Cousins type, honestly, and then they give up their 5th round pick in the 3rd and 4th next year to move up for Turner. Um, Look, a lot of people had him as the number 1 defensive player on the board, getting that player at number 17. Edge, the cost of edge. You just got Jonathan Greenard in free agency. Danielle Hunter's gone, so you're revamping this edge rushing group with Turner. And what you like here is alignment with Brian Flores' system. Brian Flores' system. There's the quarterback. Go get the quarterback. And you're going to have help. You're going to have someone creating chaos. So your job's going to be easier, and you just let him loose. So you like that, although you're paying from future draft capital to get him. They gave up a pick in the Hawkinson trade. They get Jackson. Boy, here's an interesting guy. He quit football after high school, and then he ended up all the way at Alabama after that. So he goes from quitting football to playing in Alabama, and then gets suspended from Alabama. He's almost 25 years old, but obviously the world of football keeps seeing things in him, his length, his athleticism, to try to make him work as a defender in a league that is more and more about the pass. You get another pick they gave up in the Jalen Reagor trade. You've got Rouse, a potential swing tackle. And I like this stuff. This is stuff from Dane Brugler's book, The Beast. His grandfather scored the game-winning bucket for Loyola in the 1963 national championship game. See, this Loyola team was the one that broke the gentleman's agreement, I'm making air quotes, that teams will not play more than 2 black players. They broke the agreement. So they were one of the trailblazers of integrating college basketball. His grandfather scored the game before Lorenzo Charles. There was Vic Rouse against Cincinnati scoring the game-winning bucket in overtime on a tip-in to win the national championship. His grandson now, maybe a swing tackle for Minnesota, a kicker. They gave up some picks for Dobbs and Mullins. So again, quarterback. Jurgens, potential center depth. Rodriguez, a developmental defensive tackle. But again, just like the Chicago draft, this draft is going to define the Vikings for the next 3 or 4 years, partially because they paid assets from the future to make it happen.
They can make it happen with the UDFAs. Hey, somebody I'm excited about. It doesn't happen for every team, but it happened for this team. Trey Knox, former wide receiver before he got to South Carolina. He's tight end now. Has put on the weight that he needed to, but he's a receiving weapon. So you get a receiving weapon, you get a tight end. Obviously, that's going to alert anyone out there in crazy super deep dynasty formats. South
Sure.
Carolina tight end Trey Knox is a player I'm watching, Bloom.
And they also got Gabriel Murphy. A lot of people, including Dane Brugler, had him as the best undrafted player in terms of ranking on your big board going into the draft. A productive edge rusher, undersized but skilled. Maybe somebody they look at as a tweener, too small to be a 4-3 defensive end. Not necessarily all the skills you look for in a 3-4 outside linebacker. Interesting too, his twin brother is also a UDFA signing in Miami. I think probably the reason he fell out of the draft, or at least one of them, is he was opposite Latu. Sorry, I'm going to get that eventually correctly one of these times. But I think maybe there's some skepticism. How much was he producing because the offense was so focused on his running mate, and we're often running on the North, and things looking up in both divisions.
King of the North. We got AFC North coming up next. It is the Audible. He's Sigmund Bloom. Follow him on Twitter at Sigmund Bloom. I'm at C Salami saying thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for listening too. Because this is an old school podcast right here. He's Sig. I'm Cease. We are the Audible. Stay tuned and stay frosty. All right, we're just gonna keep rolling. I did text you. Make sure
About
you're
the
on the
wire,
wire.
is it getting better?
Yeah,
I am on
yeah.
the wire.
No,
Okay,
At the end there, you were cutting out. I don't know if you're opening pages
again.
or something. It
No,
shouldn't.
I mean
It shouldn't
there's some
affect it.
pages open, but
That shouldn't
I'll
matter. That shouldn't
yeah,
matter as long as you're not
okay.
opening new stuff. But you're on the wire,
No,
so that even shouldn't matter. You should be able to
no.
watch anything.
Yeah, I'll make sure to reboot
Okay,
just in
that's
case.
fine. Yeah, tomorrow just reset your router and
Yes.
turn your computer off and all that kind of stuff. Because it's odd. It's odd. When you did the punter thing is when it was at its worst. That's why there was a little bit of a delay.
Right, I made it
In
choke.
addition to me being annoyed being
Yeah.
asked about a punter, I was like, there was also this weird delay. So then I answered, and then now they won't see that in post. Hi,
Mhm.
everybody in post. But like, yeah. So anyway, let's get AFC North in. We're just gonna
Yeah.
keep this one big file, and here we go in 3, 2, 1. It is the AFC North time draft recap. It's the Audible Cecil Lammy, Sigmund Bloom, and Baltimore getting the most technically sound corner in this draft. Sounds about right. Baltimore, you just have to sit back and admire. Even though I hate the Ratbirds, you admire what they do because Nate Wiggins, all the way at the end of the first, yes, please. Great pick there. Roger Rosengarten, Washington offensive tackle in the second round. Idisa Isaac, Penn State linebacker in the third. Devontae Walker, wide receiver, North Carolina in the fourth. He was disappointing to me at the Senior Bowl. Too many dropped passes. The Senior Bowl's got to change their practices, though, right? Because I think Bo Nix didn't have any, buzz around the Senior Bowl because the practice structure was terrible, and I think that bothered someone like Tez Walker as well. I loved him on film, and maybe that's just me when I love a guy so much, and then I see him in person, I'm like, oh, well, Tez Walker's got some talent. So fourth round value. I mean, Tez Walker could have been one of those second round, like, how did he fall today, too, kind of guys. So Tez Walker in the fourth. Yes, please. TJ Tampa, Bloom. I don't answer a bunch of questions during the draft, and I apologize. I'm trying to, focus on the draft and talk to NFL people. But like when TJ Tampa kept sliding, one of the largest questions I got on Twitter was like, why is TJ Tampa sliding? Well, of course, Baltimore is going to take him. And you know what? It's going to be good because Baltimore took him. Rasheen Ali, Marshall running back, super exciting back, lots of speed, knows how to change direction and is very quick as well. Love this game. Saw him on the All-Star road trip. Devin Leary, if there was a player, 6th round pick, Devin Leary, quarterback from Kentucky. If there was a late round quarterback I was going to take a chance on, it was Joe Milton or it was Devin Leary, right? I didn't consider Michael Pratt a late round quarterback. We talked about him in the last episode. With Leary, he's got an absolute cannon. He doesn't know where it's going, but he can throw it a long way. It's just like Joe Milton, right? Like I can throw it 85 yards. I don't know where you're going to be when I throw it. But anyway, so Leary, yeah, whatever. Take a chance on that arm. Camp arm, developmental guy, big arm, whatever. 7th round picks, 2 of them. Nick Samick, Michigan State center, and then Sanusi Kane, Purdue safety to round things out for a team that we admire him, Bloom. We don't like him, but we admire him.
Yeah, but you want your team to emulate them, especially when it's the
Yes.
draft.
Yep.
Yeah, this is always a team that whether it's the night of the draft or when we look back on their draft classes, we say, "Yeah, you do it the way Baltimore does it." Eric DeCosta just carrying on from Ozzie Newsome. We can never honor the name Ozzie Newsome enough around these parts. They stay put. They get Higgins. It was a cornerback class. It wasn't necessarily a bad cornerback class, so that's why it was odd that all the first round corners got pushed down to the bottom of the class. It was a weird first round in the way that it flowed, and certain teams, Detroit, and now Baltimore, to set themselves up to benefit from that. Philadelphia, again, these are the organizations we're saying these are good organizations. Generally, the way they do things is a good way to do it. Rosengarten, they get who might have to start right away. This team doing some turnover at tackle, but you like the tape that you've seen him, and you've seen. What's interesting here also is it seemed like, and I can't remember who put this take out there, Cease, but they said well, there's the edge, the top 3 edge, but there's also all these offensive tackles, and we have a lot of tape we can watch where we can watch these tackles face these edge, and the NFL was gonna prefer these tackles. Someone said this before the draft, and I think you saw that play out. And Rosengarten's one of those guys that no, he was not preferred over Latu. He was not preferred over those top edge, but I think he actually held his own when he had to face future NFL competition. Adiza Isaac, reunited with Odafe Owe, teammates at Penn State. He's got length, he's got energy, he's got tools. Hasn't quite come together yet, but you get that kind of player in the third round on the edge. Walker, they get from the Morgan Moses trade down. Moses now with the Jets, part of that revamping of offensive tackle. And Walker's a guy you want to use him in the deep passing game to go get it. Just go get it on the deep ball. He's going to be
Yep.
a role player, so maybe not a lot for fantasy, but he can add another dimension to this offense. Tampa, a lot of people liked him as the top value on the board whenever Baltimore got him, which tends to happen, right? Length, again, just like Higgins. And Dan Brugler had him as a second, third round pick. Ali, as you mentioned, it sees just a bursty back, a back with acceleration, a back with initial burst and acceleration. We can work around some of the other problems if you have those things. Again, as a role player, even as just a change of pace from Derrick Henry, but a player, maybe some of the things that Justice Hill did not add in terms of chunk plays in an offense that puts a defense at a disadvantage. I want to mention this about their 6th round pick because we're just gushing about the Ravens right now, right? They did not have a 6th round pick because they used it to get a 7th round pick last year to get Andrew Voorhees. I don't know if people remember Andrew Voorhees. I think he tore his ACL at the combine cease and then still asked if he could do the bench press and did like 38 reps with a torn ACL. And I don't know where he was supposed to be in the draft, like 3rd, 4th round. I don't know where he would have been, but the Ravens saw him falling down the board and said, we're going to use a pick for next year if we have to make sure we get him. Now he could be their starting right tackle this year. So yeah, starting right tackle in the 7th round. That's why they didn't have a 6th round. You mentioned Leary, and this is a guy that what a fit again, right? Tyler Huntley, right? I mean, this is a fit because he's undersized. He's got arm talent. We'll see about getting that arm talent online. Look, he was good enough to break Philip Rivers' single season passing touchdown record at NC State. And he was he had the second highest passing touchdowns in the SEC last year behind Jane Daniels. So he might need some refinement as a passer, but he's a passer and he's highly athletic. I mean, he's a true dual threat. And in
Yep.
this organization, other organizations might not be able to get as much out of him as they can get. You get a backup quarterback or even somebody you can use as a gadget player sometimes. You get that late on the 3rd day. You're doing good work. Samak is a unblocking center. Kane is a box safety. So maybe we run out of gas at the end there. But it's always fun to talk about this Ravens team when they draft, even though it isn't fun to see your team play them on Sunday.
Yeah, and I think the draft kind of ran out of gas. Maybe that's NIL,
Well, yeah, it was. Yeah.
kids
You want
staying
to talk
like
about that?
the day 3, it was like, oh, I mean, there were some guys, right?
Right.
And we'll talk about them. And God bless everyone you got drafted. I'm not saying this about anyone specifically, but just from a talent standpoint, Bloom, day 3 was pretty barren.
Yeah, and again, I wanna say that what's interesting about that, and this was I wanna say, Cease, it was around the owners' meetings, the time of the owners' meetings, I first heard that put out there by somebody from the NFL, some team personnel, like high-ranking personnel, like, put their name on it, that this year, there's only enough draftable players to get to the 5th or 6th round, and it's because of
Mhm.
name, image, likeness. But
Yep.
again, what's fascinating about this is that because of this players are able to stay in school longer because they're able to provide for their families. They're able to start to get compensated for the value they're creating in the world of football, and they can actually make a decision that's better for their future. It's better for the NFL because it makes the college football ranks a more effective minor league system if players are getting developed. Now, the transfer portal and name, image, likeness, and only care about his money. I mean, you might have a counter argument. I'm just entertaining it that if team players are like switching programs, because that was the other thing you had to get used to. See, it's like the new draft analysis is,
And teams
oh, he's
used to hate that, right?
you're right,
They used to hate,
right,
"Why is he transferring? What's going
right.
on? He couldn't stand
Everybody's transferred.
competition." Yeah,
Yeah.
now everybody does
It's
that.
rare. It's rare to find players that started and ended their college career. Not rare, but I mean, it's not the norm. It's not the majority. So maybe that might take away from the evaluation ability to pick it out when players are jumping between these different programs and systems and things like that. We'll see about how it might change players' hunger or something, getting paid before they get to the pros. But we always heard on the draft circuit, Cease, I'm going back to when we started out, 18, 19, 20 years ago, too many underclass declare early. It
Mhm.
was said in a way to look after their interest. You're saying like, "Oh, I see these kids every year that declare probably because they're trying to get something. Get it started now. Why wait? Get your pro career started now and get some sort of compensation." And uh this year was like 58 underclass. Usually it was well over 100 back in the day. So it's working, and it's going to yield better draft classes downstream. We're just in a temporary drought because it's the first wave of players staying. But you also have in it, I think we'll get to Leonard Taylor. I forget who signed him, but there was somebody saying like they had on good knowledge that he was going to get $600,000 in name, image, likeness if he had come back to school, and instead he came out and was undrafted and has to go through the grind of trying to just make a roster, get a practice squad salary. So maybe not everybody has learned yet, but this is a big development and it is changing the draft.
Well, and, I don't know what show I've said it on Bloom, but sorry, I talk a lot.
Yeah,
I know a three-star guard that got 900 grand.
right,
Three-star guard.
right. And if you don't
You're
believe
gonna
it,
make
what the
100,000 in the NFL, right?
right, right.
As a 7th round pick,
And
undrafted
maybe
guy.
not be able to work on your game because maybe not be able to work on your game as much as these because most of all, what causes development in a football player? Live reps.
Playing.
Live playing football. Yeah, you
Yes.
wanna become a better football player? Play football. If you're on the practice squad, you're not playing football. So, we'll see how this changes. And also, I think if you're astounded that a three-star guard gets 100,000 or Leonard Taylor gets 600,000, yeah, you were underestimating just how much money college football generates. And this is what it looks like when the people that make most of the value get to share in it.
Let's talk undrafted for Baltimore before we're out of here for the Ravens. And hey, not a lot again, but Rutgers wide receiver Isaiah
Right.
Washington. Nice size speed combination, Bloom. How about you?
Bo Braid, another a guy, Dane Brugler had him in the fourth, fifth round. A nickel safety project guy out of Maryland, so out of their backyard.
Okay, here we go. Cincinnati time. And my mock draft was perfect until Tennessee. And then I had them taking Marius Mims, and they didn't take Marius Mims. I was told they were going to do something shocking. Tennessee didn't. But anyway, Marius Mims, debate on is he a right? Is he a left? He played what, 8 games or whatever? It's like, I think he could be a left, but he's certainly a player that's a mountain of a man. Speaking of mountain of a man, although he's not as big as his father, but Chris Jenkins, Michigan, right?
Woo.
And we've been doing this so long, Bloom, and we run across, you know, your players like this, where it's like I covered their dad, right?
Right, right.
Like Chris Jenkins. Chris Jenkins, like, yes, again, not as large as his father, but a second round pick. I love that pick. Jermaine Burton, wide receiver, Alabama in the third round. McKinney Jackson, Texas A&M defensive tackle there. Eric All, Iowa tight end. Sorry, Josh Newton, TCU corner. Tanner McLaughlin, Arizona tight end. Let's talk about him. Cedric Johnson, Ole Miss edge. Dejon Anthony, Ole Miss safety, and then Matt Lee, Miami center to round things out for Cincinnati.
Yeah, and this is a Cincinnati draft. This is definitely a Cincinnati draft.
And
Uh,
R.I.P.
I'll
Bill Tobin. R.I.P. Bill Tobin on the
yeah,
draft that I think made the draft, like made the draft
Mhm.
much see TV, is 1994 NFL draft,
Mhm. Mhm.
and it's Bill Tobin going, "Who the hell's Mel Kiper?"
Yeah.
It
Right.
launched Kuiper into the stratosphere, and I think it launched draft coverage and like, "Oh my
Yes.
god, this guy's saying like what," da, da,"
Right.
and it was amazing. I'm getting chills just talking about it. When all you have is Jim Harbaugh, you know, passing on Trev Alberts, right?
Mhm.
Wasn't that why Mel was upset? Either way, R.I.P.
Right.
Bill Toe. I got to meet him one time, and this is a beautiful bloom. This is Genesis right here.
Mhm.
I got to meet him with Russ Landy because of
Oh,
course he knows Russ Landy. So,
of course.
but and I didn't tell him. I made the mistake with Mean Joe Green of nerding out about how much I love a guy. But when I met Bill Tobin and I was very professional, but the back of my mind I was like, this is the guy that
That's the guy, yeah.
made the draft so big. Really, that
Mhm.
that moment was a spark. It was
Yeah.
Genesis.
Yeah, yeah,
So
big bang of all
there you
this
go.
draft coverage because Mel Kiper is another self-made person. There's so
Yes.
many people in the draft where Russ Landy, self-made. Like,
Dane
truly,
Brugler.
Dane
Dane
Brugler,
Brugler was
self-made.
paid in hard drives of college games when he was on NFL
Mhm.
Draft Scout, coming up underneath Chad Ryder and Rob Rang, two of our dearest friends. Dane Brugler was working, and I don't want to get in the whole work for free thing, but like I worked in radio for 4 years for free. Like, okay, like sometimes you just got to do it a different way. I'm not saying it's the greatest and internship shouldn't be. I don't want to get started on that because that conversation is
It's
annoying, Bloom.
complicated.
But, like, this whole thing, man alive, it's amazing.
Yeah. It is, it is. It's fun. It's fun that we can talk this much about the draft and you're still listening, folks out there. So, Mims, I wanted the Steelers. I mean, look, I think that actually the Steelers' first round pick, we'll get to it, ended up a better, I'm gonna say a better pick than Mims, but as far as where the Steelers are, what they got is what they needed, and what the Bengals got is what the Bengals needed. A
Yep,
massive, massive, massive tackle who can play guard, kick him inside to guard right now, have him as a swing tackle with Orlando Brown and Trent Brown. And Trent Brown, again, not exactly known for staying healthy. That's fine. Then maybe he gets some experience. And people will look at this. Maybe what's not Bengals like about this is it is a little bit of a risky pick when you have a player who only has 8 starts. But the 8 starts look like that's what a future NFL starting tackle, that's one of the better tackles in the league, looks like. Jenkins, um, not a high ceiling player, but just lunch pail guy, a captain, and reinforcing that without DJ Reader. Now you're reinforcing that the best you can. Um, Jermaine Burton, Cease. Did Jermaine Burton come up at all? The off-field stuff or being on the Sorry Joe list of his coaches, did that come up at all in any of your conversations over the last few months?
yes,
So, what do you think about the Bengals? I mean, because it'd be one thing if it was the Steelers, right, or the Chiefs, where
right.
we have an idea of how these teams handle that kind of player. What do we think? I mean, the Bengals, I don't know what to make. It's just gone are the days of like Odell Thurman, right? Where
Mhm.
it was almost like if there's a character guy, the Bengals are going to take him, and it's all going to go downhill. Um,
Chiefs are the
Goff,
same way. Chiefs are the
yeah,
same way. Like, if it's a character guy, they're like, "What does he do on film?"
yeah. So is that the case here? I mean, look, we're not saying Burton's. It's more like how the coaches thought of him. But boy, can he
Philosophy.
play!
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, and but boy, can he play! And as an outside receiver, and he can win. And wow, I mean, I really think that with you're looking at T. Higgins gone, by the end of next year and the end of the season at the latest. So for fantasy, we love this. They get a developmental nose tackle again, reinforcing the defensive line. Eric All, again, a risky pick, but upside. Iowa tight end looked great. Medicals are a question. Can he stay healthy? But if he can't stay healthy, he can easily be the second best tight end in this class. And for fantasy, you're tied to Joe Burrow. You like that? They get a zone corner in Newton that is like Broncos, a Bengals type of corner, just nosy. Just not necessarily physically everything you're looking for, but aggressive on the ball. McLaughlin, you like this pick? Athlete, he's got the size you want if he can develop, and you're hedging all, right? This is a poor man's version of when Baltimore double dips at tight end, where you say, okay, all, if he can stay healthy, we might get a second day quality starting tight end. And meanwhile, if all can't stay healthy, we're developing this guy McLaughlin. Remember him in your tight end premium dynasty leagues. They got Johnson, a toolsy developmental edge rusher. You like developing players like him. And Anthony, they take with the Mixon pick. They got in the trade with Houston, and a lot like Newton, just not a lot of athletic upside, but you love the way he plays the position. You love how he is going to click and close and otherwise feel like that's his ball. He's a corner with my ball mentality. Matt Lee, a pass pro, someone developing as a backup center. But yeah, the Bengals, this is the best of it. Did you see the CJ Stroud, Micah Parsons stuff? The two of them in the studio together?
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
even CJ Stroud says AFC North. Yeah, AFC North is the best division in football coming out of 2023. And the Bengals are helping keep it there because this is a smart use of resources. And this is a team drafting like, hey, with T. Higgins likely on board this year, with Trey Hendrickson likely on board this year, this is a Super Bowl urgency in the same way the Jets have Super Bowl urgency.
Yeah, you should. You should. It's not about being good. It's not about making a playoff run. It's about hoisting the Lombardi trophy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about their undrafted free agents before we move on. Oklahoma State running back Elijah
Yeah.
Collins.
Yeah.
Look at his burst. Look at his
Yep.
burst. Look at his burst. Bursty back. Undrafted, super deep dynasty formats. I'm watching Elijah Collins.
Yeah, you're watching him because most Bengals beats had them taking a running back, maybe even on the second day. Because right
Yes.
now it's Chase Brown and Zach Moss, and they didn't take one. It wasn't just Dallas who neglected the position, even though everyone was looking for a running back. So Collins is interesting because he was the number one running back recruit in Michigan, and Michigan State brings him in. And as a freshman, he's great. Like breakout age. As a freshman, he was on his way to be a pretty highly touted running back prospect, and he was also a captain there. But it kind of fizzled out. He ended up transferring and didn't do as much, but he's got power. He's got the size and power. If the burst is there, Cease, yeah, he could stick and maybe eventually make some noise for this team.
Yeah, here we go. Cleveland. And the Cleveland Browns getting it done for their NFL draft. We're here to talk about it going through the AFC North. And no first round pick. So, second rounder, Michael Hall, Ohio State defensive tackle. I never saw him mocked in the first round, but you always saw a high second round for Hall there to man the defensive line for the Cleveland Browns. Zach Zinter, Michigan offensive guard in the third round. Jamari Thrash, Louisville wide receiver. Interesting game. And by the way, because I think he wore the shiny helmet, was it the Senior Bowl Bloom? This is what happens when you get old. I was like, I know I saw him. I just can't remember where. He was one of my favorite players to watch because he's always making circus plays. So Jamari Thrash, Louisville, from Louisville. Love you, Tom Jackson. Nathaniel Watson, Mississippi State linebacker in the sixth round. Miles Harden, South Dakota corner in the seventh round. And Juwan Briggs, Cincinnati defensive tackle to round things out for Cleveland.
Oh yeah, Cleveland drafted. They took some players. What a boring draft. This is a team now, again, in the NFL, if you're not progressing, if you're not moving forward, you're going backwards because everyone else is moving forward. We're talking about Baltimore, we're talking about Cincinnati, how it helps the teams this year and in the future and how it fits in what the teams do. How does this really help, or in the present even? How does this help the Browns? You give up the first round of the Watson trade. I think third or fourth rounder also in the Watson trade. Hall, okay, gap shooter, penetrator, in defensive line. With Miles Garrett, with the makeup of this pass rush, yeah, this is a player that can help. Okay, and let's face it, if Cleveland is going to get far in the playoffs, it's going to have to be on Miles Garrett. It's got to be on the pass rush. You get center. He famously broke his leg in the game with Ohio State. Captain, big, smart, tough guard. Every team can use a player like him. It's certainly good to have him as a depth player. Maybe his draft stock fell a little bit because of that injury it shouldn't have. It's just a solid second day pick, but again, nothing that's going to change your team's fate. They gave away a pick in the Judy trade. Look, listen to the list of player seats. They gave away a pick in Deion Jones trade. They gave away a pick in the Zadarius Smith trade. That's actually a good trade. They do get Thrash, who's a finesse receiver, but he can separate. You like having him as a fourth or fifth receiver if you need him. We'll see. about maybe he replaces Elijah Moore and what Moore can do as a poor man's version, at least in terms of draft capital. Watson, interesting guy, rangy linebacker, actually led the SEC in sacks and tackles, athletic. So that's a solid developmental player. Harden's a depth corner. They did get that pick trading Leroy Watson, who I think is still on Tennessee's roster. I think it was Tennessee. I don't know. Again, it's Cleveland. My mind wanders. Briggs was a Feldman freak, another gap shooter at defensive tackle. But it's hard to make the case that this was a consequential draft for this team. And it's hard to make the case, Cease, that the near-term future of the Browns is about anything other than Deshaun Watson.
Yeah. Undrafted free agent. I mean,
Right.
there's not a lot. I'm trying here, man. I'm trying, and
Yeah.
certainly, and I go back to the All Star road trip. But what did Eric Alco tweet out? Was there like 62 Shrine Bowl
Yeah.
players drafted?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I
It's
mean?
amazing.
So a lot of these guys, maybe it goes back to the NIL thing, right? And it's like, okay, so these undrafted guys, I didn't see them on the All Star road trip because they weren't
Right.
invited to the Shrine Bowl or the Senior Bowl. So
Right. Maybe
Cleveland,
that familiarity.
I got nothing. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's a Marion Brown from South Carolina, a guy with a lot of speed, little. Javion Cohen, see, it isn't very often talking about transfers. He actually was a starter at Alabama and transferred and got better offensive lineman. So he was a starting offensive lineman at Alabama, transferred, and he said was a really big difference for him, and he got a lot better last year at Miami. So maybe that could be a player they make something out of from their UDFAs.
Yeah, here we go with arguably the best draft of
Yes.
anybody.
Yes.
The Pittsburgh
Yes.
Steelers, Troy Fautanu. What is he? like, can he play all five positions? Because I think he can play all five
Yeah.
positions. So, like, all right, they got a mauler who can move. Sounds like the Steelers.
Yeah.
Sounds like a
Yeah.
country song. Zach Frazier might be, you know, the best center in this class.
Right.
Okay, there you go. Second round pick. You got two great offensive linemen. It's Steelers football. You follow that up with a hyper competitive, like dog in Roman Wilson. Now,
Hmm.
I understand some, it is a Bronco show, Bloom. I understand some are saying like Troy Franklin had some Steve Smith to his game. No, Roman Wilson does.
Yeah.
Roman Wilson does. Okay. And that's high praise because I love Steve Smith. And I'm not saying that's how he'll turn out, but to get that guy in the third round, tremendous. And then Peyton Wilson, are you kidding me? That was one of those things. It was like, why is he? What third
Uh,
and end of the third? Why is he? Wait, he was. It was one of those like. I had to go back and check. Wait, I thought he was already taken because you just generally assume, oh, he's going to go off the board late second, early third. Well, there he is at the end of the third. Peyton Wilson, linebacker, NC State, a Steelers linebacker, and then
hmm.
one of my favorite guards. Bloom, I'm so excited about this, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
rare, but there was like 4 or 5 South Dakota State players at the Shrine Bowl. Mason McCormick jumped off the page to me as a guy who's still developing, still learning, has tremendous upside there inside the trenches. Mason McCormick, he wants to smash you and crush your bones into dust. Yeah, fourth rounder. Let's go, Jackrabbits. Logan Lee, Iowa defensive tackle against sixth rounder, tremendous value there. Ryan
Hmm.
Watts, Texas corner, tremendous value there. So maybe it's not sexy because it was one skill position player, but that one skill position player is pretty good. But this might be.
Oh, yeah.
The kids would say no cap,
Yeah.
Bloom. We're too old to say that.
I,
But this might be the best draft of the entire league.
I have zero complaints as a Steelers fan, as a neurotic Steelers fan, which is kind of scary, right? Because you're
Isn't
getting
that
hit by a
weird? Because
train.
usually you and I are like, oh my God, how'd they
Yeah.
do this? Why'd they do this? And then
Oh,
now
they've
you and
had
I are
some
like, oh my
picks.
God.
Just some of the picks lately. Oh God, Kenny Pickett, Najee Harris. It's been rough. The first round has not been very enjoyable for a while, really. And this draft was exactly what this team needed. And you know what? First thing I thought at the end of this draft, Cease, this is going to hopefully get Justin Fields a second contract with this team. Like, here's a future that I'm here for. The Steelers signed Justin Fields like a 4-year, $130 million deal with $70 million guaranteed. that the things go well enough that the team wins double-digit games, that what they have built now makes it so that Fields it's kind of like J.J. McCarthy at Michigan. Notice how much Michigan's by the way, if you didn't know the story of Michigan as national champions, listen to these 8 shows, and you're going to
Right.
hear about all the players, right?
Right.
Including Roman Wilson. So Troy Fautanu, again, it sees in drafts, this kind of player is a top 10 pick, right? In a draft
Mhm.
that's not
Yep.
quarterback crazy, in a draft that doesn't have such a tremendous group of offensive tackles, this guy's a top 10 pick. Top
Yes.
10 pick. Left tackle. You got your left tackle, but like you said, CC can play any position you want, really. Really.
Right. Yeah.
Wow. How awesome is that? How awesome is it, Cease, at the end of this draft, the Steelers' offensive line is no longer such a source of worry. Thinking about my late father, Sigmund L. Bloom, and every year he was like, what do they do about the offensive line? Because we would talk about the draft. What do they do
Mhm.
with the offensive line? When are they going to take offensive line? When are they going to fix the offensive line? Well, this might be the draft that finally does it for good. Broderick Jones last year helping, of course. Frazier, and then you get your center. Oh, Frazier. Oh my, West Virginia, right down the road, right down I-79. And this is the guy that famously limped off the field on one leg with the other leg broken, so his team didn't have to use a timeout at the end of a game, and just he could start right away. And this is the guy. This is the guy. I mean, this cease. Rest in peace, Mike Webster. Mike Webster, Dermontti Dawson, Marquise
Mm.
Pouncey. Can we
Mm-mm.
pick that? Can we
Mm.
pick that back up? Can we pick that back up now? Can we pick that back up? Yes, we can. Yes, we
Luminaries at
can.
the center position.
That's it, man. Roman Wilson. This is the guy a lot of people had linked to the Steelers in the second round.
Mhm.
And a speed slot with toughness. A speed slot with toughness. And much like JJ McCarthy, don't hold against him what he wasn't asked to do at Michigan. Instead, look at how did he perform when the game focused on him and said, on this play, you're really important, and what you do on this play is important. How did Roman Wilson? How many times was it Roman Wilson coming up with a play in the passing game when they needed it on the other end of those JJ McCarthy third down throws? Right?
Right. Right.
Oh yeah. He can give them look, he's not a tap dancing separator like Deontay Johnson, but in terms of influence on the game, he can give them what they lost in Deontay Johnson. No problem. No problem. Third round pick. They got that in a great wide receiver class. They got a guy that they needed that fits their mentality at a discount in the third round. And then Wilson, boy, you talk about a discount. And you know what's sweet about this one, Cease? This was the bump up in the Kenny Pickett trade. So what did you give for Kenny Pickett? Well, the bump up from the fourth round to the end of the third round. And you see Peyton Wilson sitting there. Peyton Wilson, some people had as high as the 40s in this draft. And I think if it wasn't for medicals, he
Mhm.
could have been potentially a first round pick. Plays with his hair on fire and athletically is everything you want at the position in an era when the NFL is so focused on stopping the pass. Apparently he doesn't have an ACL on one of his knees. It's the Pittsburgh Steelers, baby. That's Hines Ward. We've done this already. We've done this story already. Player falls in the third round, even though he's a player because he doesn't have an ACL on one of his knees. Yeah, sign me up. Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson. Even if Peyton Wilson doesn't make it to the end of this, because the whole thing is like, can he make it through a rookie contract? Every time we hear this during the draft, oh, teams let this very good, very talented player drop because we're like, well, what's the longevity of this player? Well, come on, what's the longevity of any player? Who knows what's going to happen in
Right.
the next 3-4 years for any of these guys if they're going to
Ain't
make it
forever, baby.
physically? Yeah. So yes, Peyton Wilson. Yes. And again, Cease going into this offseason, inside linebacker. Oh my gosh, what is this team going to do about inside linebacker? All the different names, all the different injuries last year, and the Devin Bush trade leaving this giant hole. And now potentially this is a plus. This is a strength of this team now. In the fourth round, McCormick, and I'm going to echo what you say about McCormick. I mean, this is a guy with a ton of experience, can give you good depth at both guard positions, but both Fautanu and McCormick. What you really like, what some of the best tape you're going to see on these guys is you get them pulling out on the hoof and you just let them destroy somebody. Like just let them pick someone out, and that's Steelers football, baby. That's
Yes.
Steelers football. That's
Yes.
Steelers football. Like let's let our big guy tee off on someone that he's got like a 50-pound, like 4-inch weight advantage on. That's going to see him coming downhill at him, and let's run behind that. Yes, Thank you. May I have another? And yet Lee, okay, this is a player that fits. Again, if you're an old Steelers fan like us, what do the Steelers always do? I'm thinking of Aaron Smith. What a great Steeler he was.
Oh man, Northern
The
Colorado,
Steelers,
baby.
and the Steelers would find these players that the NFL would say, well, he's not quite beefy enough to be an immovable object, two gapper inside, but he's not dynamic enough to be an edge. What do we do with this guy? And the Steelers turn those guys into good 3-4 defensive ends. That's what they do. They develop them, and Lee has the frame. And look at all this beef. Look at all this beef this team gets. I know that some people don't like this old school football mentality, but there is something about just being bigger and stronger and meaner than your opponent. Just right off the bus. Who's bigger? Who's stronger? Who's meaner? Right? You know, this is Dan Campbell too. So you love this. And then they get Watts. Okay, this guy, I mean, is he a corner? Is he a safety? How does he fit? I know this: when you're late on the third day of the draft, and you get a 6'3", 210 defensive back, stop right there, a 6'3", 210 defensive back who can run a 4.53 with a 40.5-inch vert and a 6'8", 2.3 cone. See, so imagine if he was a wide receiver prospect, and we were talking about those.
Oh,
numbers.
they love him, right?
You're like, oh, we can make something out of this guy. So hey, the Steelers at the end of all this get a really interesting developmental guy for their secondary. No complaints. The first time in the history of this show, no complaints.
John Rice Plumlee, we got a runner.
Yeah,
he's like a shoplifter, right? And we got a runner. That's it. I mean, for undrafted guys, yeah.
Again, a Steeler though, you know, a quarterback wide receiver tweener. Is he a quarterback? Is he a wide receiver? Well, the Steelers can make Hines Ward, Antoine Randall L. Yeah, I mean the Steelers.
I love it.
And you like Dajuan Edwards, Amos Zaraway, anybody? I think I'm just stuck in my nostalgia today. I think I'm just stuck in like the good old days of, when I say the good old days, before they won the Super Bowl, and how this team was built. And as a kid and as someone getting into the draft, understanding team building and understanding teams' types and roles and schemes. And the Steelers haven't had a back like Amos Zaraway for a while, I think. A scat back who also can block in pass pro. That's what you like about Edwards, is he can be a 2-minute drill back. He's got initial quickness. He's not a long speed scat back, but he's got initial quickness. Imagine him next to Justin Fields in a 2-minute drill where the defense is going to be spread out. He's got good hands. He's got good pass blocking skills. He's got a lot of experience for Georgia. I think he's going to make the team as a third running back. I think he's going to have an instant role for a Steelers team that I am very excited to watch. So where is the tragedy and fear and bad feelings going to come? Well, for today, I'm not thinking about that.
Feeling good today. Bloom, you went from yawning over the Browns draft to being like, super chatty.
It's a new day. Yeah.
That's a new dawn. That's right. He is Sigmund Bloom, and that's a wrap for the AFC North. We got 8 of these for you. Never eat sour wheat. The East is coming up next, but that's a wrap for the draft recap here on the Audible. He's Sigmund Bloom. You follow him on all the socials. Well, one social, Twitter. At Sigmund Bloom. I'm at Cecil Lammy. One is enough. Yeah. We thank you all for participating. Hey, help us out on YouTube as we grow our YouTube channel here for Football Guys. Like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid. He's Sig. I'm Cease. We are the Audible. Stay tuned, and would you please stay frosty,